The gavel hit hard, and the room went silent. The sound echoed like thunder in the chamber, bouncing off the walls, demanding attention. Every chair shifted. Every breath waited. At the center, Senator Ted Cruz leaned forward. His lips curled into a smirk, the kind that fed on spectacle. He glanced at Jasmine Crockett, then let his words drop like bait. "Congresswoman, maybe if you spent less time with slogans and more time with substance, we'd get somewhere." The room froze. A ripple of whispers broke the silence. Some stifled laughs. Others frowned. All eyes locked on Crockett. Her hands rested steady on the desk. Her face gave nothing away. Not anger. Not fear. Just stillness. Cruz pressed on, emboldened by the hush. "We're here to discuss laws, not your theatrics." The smirk grew wider. He thought he had the upper hand. But silence is not surrender. Crockett's stillness became its own power. Every second she waited, the tension tightened. The air itself seemed to lean closer, listening for her reply. A pause felt like thunder. She finally lifted her eyes, fixing them on Cruz. The smirk on his face faltered, if only for a flicker. Because silence before the storm is its own warning. The chamber felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were bracing for impact. Even Cruz shifted slightly in his chair, though he tried to mask it. She hadn't spoken yet, but already, the room belonged to her. Cruz leaned back, drumming his fingers. The arrogance remained, but cracks showed in the rhythm. He had thrown his jab. He expected fluster. He expected defense. What he would get was something far sharper. The gavel had started this silence. Her voice would end it. But Crockett's reply was about to cut deeper than anyone expected. This wasn't just a jab, it was a test of strength in front of the nation. The chamber wasn't an ordinary room. It was a stage. Cameras rolled. Reporters scribbled. Every eye turned to capture the smallest tremor, the slightest hesitation. What looked like an insult between two lawmakers was something far greater. It was a battle for respect, and beneath it, a fight over power itself. Cruz's smirk wasn't just mockery. It was a signal. A reminder of how power had been used for decades. To belittle, to dismiss, to silence voices that challenged the system. The silence burned. Jasmine Crockett knew it. Everyone in the chamber knew it. This wasn't about her words in that moment. It was about who got to speak freely, and who was told to sit down. And the deeper fault line beneath all of it? Voter suppression. Every word carried risk. Because when Crockett raised her voice against suppression, she wasn't just pushing back at Cruz. She was touching the very nerve of democracy, the right of every citizen to be heard. And that truth terrified those who relied on silence. Eyes shifted across the room. Some lawmakers shifted in discomfort, as if the word suppression itself was too heavy to be spoken. Others leaned forward, eager for a clash. The stakes weren't academic. They were real. Whole communities had felt their votes questioned, their voices muffled, their power diluted. And now, in this hearing, Cruz had chosen to mock rather than listen. "Respect is earned, Congresswoman," he had sneered earlier, but the irony hung heavy, because respect was exactly what his words tried to deny. What Crockett understood, and what viewers would soon see, was that this wasn't just personal. It was structural. Every laugh at her expense, every smirk meant to undermine, was part of a larger game where power stayed in the hands of the few. The chamber grew hotter, though no one moved. The lights seemed harsher. The cameras zoomed closer. This was politics stripped of polish, raw, confrontational, dangerous. If Crockett faltered, the narrative would be simple: she was silenced. If she fought back, it could ripple far beyond the walls of this room. And she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every voter who had stood in line for hours, for every ballot tossed aside, for every voice that had been told it didn't matter. The insult from Cruz had been the spark. The fire underneath was far bigger. The audience didn't just sense it. They felt it. Whispers moved like current across the chamber. A cough echoed like a crack in stone. Even the press, usually still behind their laptops, seemed to pause. Because they all knew this was heading somewhere no one could control. The battle lines weren't just between Cruz and Crockett. They were between arrogance and dignity, suppression and democracy, silence and voice. And as the silence stretched, as every second thickened into suspense, one question lingered in the air: who would blink first? But to understand the full weight, you need to know the man who threw the first stone. For Ted Cruz, ridicule was strategy, not slip, a weapon sharpened over years. The smirk was practiced. It wasn't born in that chamber. It had been perfected in debates, polished in courtrooms, tested on cameras where the line between law and theater blurred. Cruz thrived in chaos. The interruptions, the sharp tone, the sudden pivots, these weren't accidents. They were rehearsed. Every barb was a calculated strike meant to rattle, to distract, to corner his opponents into defense. He knew the effect of mockery. A laugh could cut deeper than a policy argument. A sneer could stick longer than a statistic. And for years he had wielded that weapon without hesitation. But arrogance carries risk. Behind the sharpness lay contradictions that critics never forgot. He had built his reputation as a constitutional warrior, yet bent when it served him politically. He spoke of defending democracy, yet aligned with efforts that raised questions about silencing voters. Still, Cruz embraced the role of provocateur. He didn't just want to win arguments, he wanted to humiliate opponents. To turn hearings into spectacles. To make every clash about dominance, not substance. If you can't stand the heat, Congresswoman, maybe politics isn't for you. He once quipped in similar fashion, words meant less to debate and more to diminish. It wasn't new. Cruz had clashed with senators, judges, even members of his own party. He relished the fight. He fed on confrontation. It gave him headlines. It kept him in the spotlight. But over time, the tactic carried scars. Critics called it theater. Allies whispered that his sharpness isolated him. Opponents learned to anticipate the smirk, to expect the interruption, to see through the show. And yet Cruz continued. Because for him, mockery was not a weakness. It was survival. It was how he framed himself as sharper, quicker, tougher than those across the aisle. Every insult in that chamber wasn't just aimed at Crockett. It was aimed at the millions watching, a signal to his base that he wouldn't yield, wouldn't soften, wouldn't play by rules of civility. Suspicion followed his every move. Was it conviction? Or performance? Was he defending principles? Or staging a show for the cameras? And in this hearing, those questions only grew sharper. Because the issue beneath the surface wasn't theater at all. It was democracy. It was whether every citizen's voice mattered. And Cruz chose mockery to meet it. The silence after his jab at Crockett wasn't accidental. It was bait. He wanted her rattled. He wanted the smirk to be the headline. He wanted to control the story before it was even written. But mockery can backfire. Every smirk risks turning into arrogance. Every sneer risks exposing weakness. And for the first time in a long time, Cruz wasn't facing someone willing to fold. Jasmine Crockett wasn't the usual opponent. She didn't flinch. She didn't stumble. She didn't rush to defend herself against the insult. Her stillness unnerved him more than argument could. The chamber saw it too. The practiced lines. The calculated interruptions. The smirk that was meant to dominate. Suddenly, they looked less like strength and more like fragility. Because arrogance, when exposed, carries its own weight. And Cruz had underestimated one thing: Jasmine Crockett's fire. Jasmine Crockett didn't walk into Congress with privilege, she walked in with fire. Every step of her journey carried weight. She didn't inherit influence, she built it. She didn't step into rooms expecting deference, she stepped in prepared for resistance. Her voice never shook, not because she never faced fear, but because she had learned to live with it, and push through it. Before the chamber lights, before the cameras, there were long nights of study, cases that no one else wanted, and clients who had nowhere else to turn. She stood beside the forgotten, the overlooked, the dismissed. That was her training ground, and she wore it like armor. Every step was earned. She had been underestimated before. Professors who doubted her grit. Opponents in the courtroom who thought she was too young, too untested, too soft-spoken. But time after time, she proved that quiet resolve could break louder arrogance. In the courtroom, she learned precision. A single sentence could sway a jury. A pause could change the rhythm of an entire trial. And above all, she learned that truth, when delivered without fear, could cut deeper than theatrics. Those lessons followed her into politics. She didn't run for office to join the performance. She ran to fight for those who felt silenced. And when she won, it wasn't because the system cleared the path. It was because she refused to bow to it. In Congress, she quickly gained a reputation. Direct. Sharp. Unwilling to let mockery or disrespect slide unchallenged. She didn't trade in insults, but she never let them linger unanswered. If you think I'll sit quiet while people are denied their voice, then you haven't been paying attention. Her fire wasn't reckless. It was disciplined. It came from every case she fought, every voter she listened to, every promise she carried into the chamber. But with that fire came risk. Each time she spoke up, she invited pushback. Each time she stood firm, she painted a target on her back for those who thrived on arrogance and spectacle. And yet that was her choice. To stand anyway. To meet arrogance with dignity, mockery with clarity, suppression with truth. People underestimated her at their own peril. She didn't need the loudest voice. She needed the truest one. Crockett's rise wasn't about privilege. It was about persistence. She built credibility case by case, moment by moment, never forgetting the communities that sent her here. She carried that history into every chamber. Into every clash. Into this very moment. Because she knew what Cruz didn't, that fire wasn't for show. It was survival. It was the strength of someone who had lived the very struggles others tried to erase. Her opponents often assumed she'd break under pressure. They saw her calm demeanor and thought it meant weakness. They didn't see the years of battles behind it. But calm doesn't mean fragile. Calm can be steel. I don't shout because I have to. I speak because I refuse to be silent. Her journey was more than a resume. It was proof that courage can be shaped in struggle, sharpened in conflict, and carried into the highest halls of power. Now, all of it, the courtroom battles, the political fights, the long road that had shaped her, stood behind her like a shield. Cruz had his smirk. She had her fire. And in this chamber, with cameras rolling and history watching, the collision was inevitable. And now, all that fire was aimed at Cruz. Cruz leaned in, voice dripping with mockery, but Crockett's stare didn't blink. The chamber's air snapped with tension. Cameras zoomed tighter. Pens scratched faster. He spoke again, sharper this time. Congresswoman, maybe you're confused about the facts, but I'm here to remind you what the law actually says. The tone was condescending, clipped, calculated to irritate. But Crockett didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on him, steady as stone. She raised her mic, her words measured. Senator, what I'm not confused about is the people who are losing their right to vote while we sit here trading barbs. A sharp laugh cut through the chamber, Cruz's laugh, smug and hollow. He leaned back, shaking his head, as if her words were a child's error. Spare us the speeches. He cut in. We're here for substance, not sound bites. The interruptions came quick, like jabs. Each time she spoke, he interjected. Each pause he tried to fill with his voice. But every word felt heavier from her side. She kept her tone firm, never rising, never rattled. Each interruption only magnified the contrast between arrogance and clarity. The room leaned closer. Staffers exchanged glances. Even reporters, long numb to these hearings, seemed to catch their breath. Crockett pressed forward. You call it a soundbite. I call it a warning. When people stand in line for hours and get turned away, that isn't drama. That's democracy breaking. The silence after her words was heavy, but Cruz broke it with a scoff. Here we go again with the scare tactics. He leaned across the desk now, trying to overshadow her with his presence. But the harder he pressed, the more it showed, the desperation behind the mockery. The clash built like a storm. Words crashed, voices collided, but Crockett never lost control. Her comebacks grew sharper. Her pauses more deliberate. Each time he tried to cut her off, she left a silence that forced the room to hear her anyway. The air snapped with tension again as Cruz pounded the desk lightly, smirking, certain he still controlled the rhythm. But those watching, in the chamber, on screens across the country, could see it shifting. The balance tilting. The arrogance unraveling. Every second anticipation grew. What would Crockett say next? How far would Cruz go? Would she finally break under the constant jeers? But Crockett didn't break. She built. With each line, she drew closer to the truth he feared most. The truth no smirk could erase, no laugh could deflect. And when it came, it wouldn't be a jab. It would be a strike that landed with the weight of history. And then, she unleashed the truth he feared. Her words didn't just answer Cruz, they exposed the game he was playing. The chamber, once buzzing with interruptions, suddenly felt like a stage on the brink of collapse. Cruz had pushed and prodded, laughing, jeering, mocking, but now, the rhythm had shifted. It was Crockett's turn, and she carried the weight of every silenced voter, every dismissed voice. She leaned forward, voice steady but fierce. You mock me, Senator, but the real joke is the way your party tries to silence millions of voices. The silence after her words was louder than his jeers. Cruz blinked, caught off guard. His smirk twitched, still trying to hold its shape. He opened his mouth to cut her off, but she didn't give him the chance. Her voice rose, not in volume but in force. You interrupt me. You laugh. You wave your hand like this is theater. But tell me, Senator, is it theater when citizens stand in the rain for 6 hours, only to be told the polls closed? Is it a punchline when ballots vanish under technical errors? Gasps spread across the room. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards. Cruz shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. The smirk was gone. She pressed on, her tone a blade. You thrive on chaos, Senator. You hope the noise drowns out the truth. But noise can't hide the math. The fewer voices at the ballot box, the louder your power echoes. That's not democracy. That's manipulation. For the first time all hearing, Cruz looked smaller. The man who had strutted on laughter now leaned back, silent, watching her words land like strikes. She didn't pause. She couldn't. Every voter you mock, every line you dismiss, every suppression tactic you defend, those people are listening. They see you laugh. And they know exactly what side you've chosen. The chamber murmured, a ripple of unease and admiration. Cruz forced a chuckle, but it rang hollow. This is emotional theater. You're grandstanding. But Crockett didn't miss a beat. Grandstanding? No, Senator. This is me standing for those who can't speak in this room. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it should. The audience stirred. A few heads nodded. Cruz's face tightened further, his usual weapon, mockery, now blunted. He shifted in his chair, grasping for control. But Crockett was relentless. You pride yourself on clever lines and courtroom tricks. But this isn't a court where you can spin juries with smirks. This is the people's house. And the people deserve truth, not theater. Gasps again. A sharp intake of breath. The chamber felt electric. Reporters later noted how, in that moment, Cruz's silence became the headline. She paused now, finally, letting the weight of her words settle. The room leaned in. Even Cruz, who moments earlier dominated with interruptions, had nothing to wield but clenched hands and a stiff jaw. Then came the strike that sealed it. You laugh at me, Senator. But history won't laugh with you. It will remember who mocked democracy, and who fought for it. The silence was absolute. Even the hum of air vents seemed to vanish. And then, a stir. A gasp. A scattered applause from the back row before the gavel banged for order. But it was too late. The moment was stamped. The smirk was gone. The power had shifted. Within an hour, #JusticeForAll was trending nationwide. Clips of Crockett's words flooded feeds, her voice looping over captions. History won't laugh with you. Cruz had underestimated her fire. He had treated her as an easy foil, a target for ridicule. But ridicule had met resilience, and resilience had won the floor. The chamber, for all its pomp and order, had witnessed a reversal. The underdog had risen, not with shouting, not with noise, but with precision and courage. Crockett's mic-drop counterattack wasn't just an answer, it was a reckoning. And yet, as the gavel fell and the room buzzed with reaction, one truth lingered. This fight wasn't over. It had only begun outside the room. The clips spread faster than wildfire, every second replayed, every word dissected. Screens lit up everywhere. Phones buzzed. Laptops chimed. Social media feeds filled with her words, her gaze, her fire. #JusticeForAll exploded across platforms, trending within hours. They thought they could silence her. Instead, she lit the whole country on fire. Supporters rallied online and off. Comments poured in admiration, pride, astonishment. People shared clips, dissected lines, highlighted every sharp turn of phrase. Even those who hadn't followed the hearing felt the tension, the courage, the stakes. Across the media, analysts scrambled. Networks replayed her words. Newspapers ran headlines emphasizing her composure and precision. Cruz's smirk, once dominating, became the symbol of miscalculation, a visual of arrogance faltering. Whispers of disbelief circled Capitol halls. Lawmakers and staffers, long accustomed to polished performances, admitted quietly that Crockett had changed the narrative in minutes. Cruz's allies tried to spin, to downplay the moment, but the viral clips left little room for control. Every attempt at rebuttal seemed muted, out of step with the undeniable force of Crockett's delivery. Meanwhile, supporters felt vindicated. Pride surged. Here was someone standing firm, refusing to back down, calling out injustice with clarity. Her courage inspired not just applause but action. Petitions, hashtags, and calls for reform grew in tandem with her reach. The reactions were chaotic yet thrilling. Laughter mixed with shock as commentators replayed Cruz's faltering composure. Headlines changed by dawn, reshaping the narrative. A simple insult had become a nationwide spectacle, a turning point for public perception. Even the casual observer could see the contrast, arrogance meeting dignity, mockery facing truth. Crockett's poise stood in sharp relief against Cruz's attempt at domination. They underestimated her, and the lesson hit harder than any critique. In the halls of power, whispers turned to conversations. Colleagues shared clips in stunned amazement. Students and young activists celebrated her sharp rebuttals as proof that measured, fearless words could cut through centuries of political theater. The viral aftermath wasn't just about humiliation or applause. It was proof that truth, when delivered without fear, resonates further than smirks or staged interruptions. Every replayed moment reminded viewers that courage could overcome mockery. For Cruz, the stumble left a mark. A pause that viewers and political observers alike would remember. For Crockett, it cemented a reputation, fearless, precise, unflinching. The shockwaves didn't end at the chamber doors. They rippled through social media, classrooms, community centers, anywhere people discussed democracy, fairness, and representation. Every share, every comment, every replay magnified the impact. The country had witnessed more than a debate. They had witnessed a reversal of power, a moment where dignity met arrogance and emerged victorious. The lesson was clear: words, facts, and courage could topple even the most practiced smirk. And yet, as the buzz continued and the hashtags trended, the larger truth lingered beneath the surface, quietly waiting to be grasped. But beyond the noise, there was a deeper lesson. In the end, this wasn't about an insult, it was about a battle for democracy itself. The room seemed smaller now, as if the walls had absorbed the weight of every word, every glance, every silent pause. What had started as a clash between two lawmakers had become something far larger, a testament to courage, dignity, and the power of truth. Every word echoed beyond the walls. Citizens watching, scrolling, listening, could feel it. This was a moment that stretched past protocol and political theater, past smirks and mockery, into the heart of what it meant to have a voice. Crockett's stand had shown that arrogance, no matter how practiced or polished, could be met with clarity and conviction. Her courage wasn't loud, it was precise, measured, fierce. It cut through the distractions and the performances to reach the core of the issue: fairness, equality, and representation. We don't rise by putting others down. We rise by ensuring every voice counts. The lesson was bigger than one debate. It was a reminder that political systems, while riddled with gamesmanship, could be held accountable by those who refused to back down. It was a call to citizens, lawmakers, and activists alike: vigilance matters. Dignity matters. Truth matters. Crockett's moment also offered inspiration. It wasn't about theatrics or applause. It was about standing firm, about using knowledge and courage to challenge systems built on complacency and suppression. For those watching, it was a beacon: resistance, when paired with preparation and integrity, could prevail. It was never just about them, not Cruz, not Crockett, not even the chamber. The stakes reached far beyond, touching communities silenced, ballots questioned, rights denied. The victory in that room symbolized hope that voices, long ignored, could be amplified. When you fight for what is right, even the walls of power can tremble. The moral clarity was undeniable. Courage coupled with truth had changed the narrative. Arrogance had faltered. The audience had witnessed the triumph of principle over performance, of reason over ridicule. It was a blueprint for how integrity could overcome theatrics in the highest halls of governance. And yet, hope came with responsibility. The fight against suppression, against mockery used as weaponry, continued beyond that chamber. Every citizen, every advocate, every elected official had a role to play in carrying forward the lesson that dignity, knowledge, and steadfastness could break cycles of arrogance and inequity. As the chamber emptied, the echoes lingered. Reporters recounted the confrontation. Citizens replayed the clip online. Conversations spread through homes and offices, classrooms and communities. The moment wasn't fleeting. It had already begun shaping perception, conversation, and action. And that's why this moment will not be forgotten. It wasn't a simple debate won or lost. It was a declaration that truth, delivered with courage, can cut through power. That dignity can silence mockery. That one voice, prepared and fearless, can ripple far beyond a single room, beyond a single day, beyond expectation. Crockett had not only defended herself, she had defended democracy itself. This was one battle, but the war for truth and democracy is still unfolding. The chamber lights dimmed, but the echoes of Crockett's words lingered. Every viewer, every citizen, had seen what courage looked like. The calm precision that could dismantle arrogance, the fire that could awaken a nation. The fight isn't over. Across the country, conversations were sparking, movements forming, and voices rising. History is still being written, and every action matters. If we stay silent, the game continues. If we speak, the story changes. Your voice matters. Share the moments that reveal truth. Question what is presented as power. Stand for what cannot be silenced. This was a single chamber. A single debate. But the lessons stretch far beyond, into communities, classrooms, newsrooms, and ballot lines. Every citizen has a role in keeping accountability alive, in ensuring dignity and fairness are defended. So stay alert, because the next showdown may already be brewing. The cameras may move, the headlines may change, but the stakes, justice, equality, democracy, remain. And when the next challenge arises, remember what courage looks like, and let it guide every voice willing to rise.